friends, welcome to the Swayam portal of online refresher course in philosophy under MHRD Government of India. Today we will discuss the module on the theme under Indian Theories of Language, Mādhyamika Theory of Meaning. Friends, in the present module, I will ponder upon the Madhyamika philosophy of language, which denies the corresponding relationship between meaning and reference, as it shows the emptiness of concepts and language, because they defile the purity of mind and make false ontological claims. Since the Madhyamika literature is too vast to serve my purpose in this presentation, I shall be very selective with regard to Madhyamika sources and thinkers. My discussion of the Madhyamika treatment of language and meaning is based on this selective work of its representative thinkers like Nagarjuna, Aryadev, Chandrakirti, Shantidev and Pragya Karamiti. First, we will start with the purpose of Madhyamika philosophy. The Madhyamika philosophy, like any other discipline and endeavour, has a purpose, individual as well as social. And this purpose is to make the world worth living by creating a universal culture in which the life of an individual is transformed for good. He retains his identity, make his living and activities more meaningful. Nagarjuna's main purpose is to cultivate and promote the culture of love and compassion, which are human instincts and from which all other virtues ensures. His interpretations of the teachings of the Buddha arouse anxiety in an individual over the suffering of humanity, which anxiety in turn manifests boundless love and compassion towards the suffering lot. His actions are guided by these emotions. With this practical and social aim, purpose, concern and commitment, says Chandrakirti, Nagarjuna has composed his Madhyamika so that others are also enlightened, educated and motivated to do good to others. The fulfillment of this aim was possible only when the root cause of universal suffering is destroyed. This cause is nothing but the personal ego. This kind of mental activity further generates polarities and conflicts in our behavior, mental, linguistic and physical. The tendency of mind becomes prejudiced according to these views and is then reflected in these behaviors. More on this later. Now, before coming to the Madhyamika treatment of some of the new key issues which are haunting them, I would like to mention some of the important theses, presuppositions, assumptions which they always carry with them. First, forms and symbols are created by ego. In choosing the basic elements for philosophical or other activities, whatever is the most appealing or illuminating is acted upon. Beings come into existence having been dependent on causes and conditions, which are hypothesizing concepts and judgments. Next, that being which arises of concepts has in reality not arisen. That being which arises have been dependent on this or that concepts. Judgments or worldview has not arisen essentially or ontologically. That is, concepts generated being lack its own nature. Own nature of a being is neither created by concepts and judgments nor dependent on other concepts, judgments or beings. That which possesses contradictory characteristics does not exist ontologically. Any two things cannot be proved to exist if they are not shown to be identical with or different from each other. That which is phenomenal world, that which is subject to the process of coming into or going out of existence is for its origin based on stuffed by concepts as short arises from long and vice versa. But that which is not thus dependent or stuffed is called nirvana. On cessation of discursive thinking, metaphysical, linguistic, hypothesizing activities ceases. The ultimate reality can be shown as thatness whose nature is beyond conceptual causes, quiescent, indescribable by hypothesizing thought and language, free from discriminative activity of mind and not endowed with many meanings, as sustained discursive thinking attributes them to it. In other words, concepts, judgments and language are not ontologically bound. Reason cannot know reality, that is, human reason fails to give knowledge of reality. Linguistic activity is hypostatizing activity. Hypostatizing activity is linguistic activity. It creates its own meaning and hypostatizes it. Discursive thinking through analytic synthetic method is form creating and symbolizing activity of mind. On the realization of emptiness of concepts, judgments and subjective world views by hypostatizing activity of mind comes to an end. Kalpana-free reality is not the referent of words. In other words, words refer to kalpana, generated entities only. The phenomenal world consists in linguistic convention and other empirical behaviors, that is, its characteristics feature is to maintain dichotomy between expression and expressible, knowledge and knowable, etc. The true nature of reality is incomprehensible by empirical knowledge instruments. In other words, perceptual or logical means fail to grasp the true nature of reality because they essentially function under the spell of ignorance. Ultimate reality or meaning is beyond concept, quiescent, only to be realized internally and outside all sorts of hypothesizing or linguistic activities. Words are not like policemen on the prowl. We are not subject to their independence. On the contrary, their truth lies in their efficacy, Shakti. They take their meaning from the intention of one using them. Those who do not know the distinction between the two truths, empirical and transcendental, can never know the true import of the Buddha's teaching. Nirvana is therapeutic in the sense that it is a state of mind which is cessation or dissipation of all sorts of discursive thinking. These basic theses or assumptions of the Madhyamika are not without justification. They are comprehensible once we understand the form creating, symbolizing and hypostatizing nature of mind, which also engages itself the interplay of concepts and judgments. To understand the whole Madhyamika philosophy, I claim it is necessary to understand the mechanism of ego or the functioning of mind. Moving on, the principle of meaning and convention. The two characteristics of mind. First, its inability to know the real as it is and its ability to form various concepts and symbols and to relate them to the concept of a particular thing, for example, cow, are the main factors in giving rise to the principle of meaning. They may respectively be called agyan or pragyapati. The latter structures not only concepts and words but also a sentence consisting of them. It claims to represent the structure of a complex fact lying in the world. Pragyapati suggests a relationship between language and the world. Language is thus considered the mirror of representing the structure of the world in terms of its substance, properties and relations. Our understanding of the world is based on the comprehension of this linguistic or grammatical structure, which further determines our knowledge of the same. The consistency in our knowledge and understanding depends on the internal consistency of the language we use following grammatical rules. This consistency in our knowledge, understanding and language is maintained when they are guided by a single perspective or a system of thought. Truth is determined by it, thus becomes at empirical level relative to the framework of particular system in question. Now, no proposition is then absolutely true. The meaning of a proposition varies from system to system. In a way, in every truth value judgment, a philosophical system's general characteristic is reflected. The Madhyamika is trying to show the hollowness and irrelevance of such value judgments, a sure way of rising to a higher level of consciousness, which makes the scope of our cultural activities more and more encompassing. We find that in respect of a person, consistency in knowledge, understanding and language is not always stable. The subjective nature of the mind of the person is capable of creating various, sometimes conflicting as well as opposed perspectives of the same world. Level alone the creativity of other minds. In such a state of confusion, it becomes difficult for him to comprehend even the conventional meaning of an expression. As a matter of fact, different perspectives give rise to different meanings of the same grammatically correct expression, which may be true, false or meaningless according to the perspective. This is the state of conceptual puzzlement. For the Buddhist like Nagarjuna, such knowledge, understanding and language are empty in content, even non-empirical and socially purposeless, harmful. Therefore, most fundamental Buddhist requirement is to understand the nature of mind so that its subjective nature is arrested. Otherwise, conceptual puzzlement arising from various ways of structuring the patterns of concepts and words by various persons will ultimately result in the manifestation of physical conflicts in the society. Such patterns are the product of sustained discursive thinking, which are the root of which, as I have discussed, are possessiveness, aversion, delusion, the three afflictions generated by ignorance. They together create a province of meaning, which on the Mādhyamika analysis proves to be empty in content. This does not mean that the Madhyamika maintains a futility of all sorts of linguistic structure by interplay of concepts and judgments. He does prove of empirically justified linguistic structure for day-to-day life transactions. But so far as talk of any relationship between such language and the world is concerned, the Madhyamika suggests to maintain silence. But he does not subscribe to mundane linguistic convention. Lok Vihar, as I have said, he does not admit a world in which we live, experience and act. He is not denying harmony, unity, pattern, regularities in the things of the world, existence and ways of behavior, mental, linguistic and physical. He himself is the part of the world in which he participates. The ways of living, observing, thinking, speaking, acting, feeling and interacting are the natural phenomena which set the mundane conventions in practice. The linguistic and other signs are the product of such conventions when members of a society agree upon their common use with fixed meanings. The social customs, norms and value change, modify or extend their use and meanings in a restricted sense. But when this exercise is unrestricted, they become unnatural conventions and thus non-empirical. Here the whole exercise is deliberate, non-cognitive, non-reflectional, meaningless and empty in meaning and content. The Madhyamika himself is using language to analyze language. This is possible only when the reality of the world and the validity of linguistic convention is admitted. But the conventionality of language and meaning are confined to our behavior in the empirical world only. Any extended use of linguistic sign and conventions and any free and arbitrary intellectual and linguistic flight from mundane conventions are demonstrated by the Madhyamika as cognitively vacuous and semantically meaningless. From the following discussion, it is clear that concepts formation is constructive of our existence. Moreover, from the preceding analysis, it is now clear that language has its origin in the mental activities. This means that emptiness and cessation of the mechanism of ego will lead to the emptiness and cessation of language. In other words, the act of languaging is the act of subjective functioning of ego. What language tries to describe or refer to is not an ontological entity. The Mādhyamika may be said to be subscribed to non-metaphysical ontology. We have seen that a stopping of hypostatizing activity of mind withdraws all its projection as subject and its predicates. Language then becomes non-reflectional, non-cognitive and empty in content and is thus silenced from claiming to give definite descriptions of reality. Since mental activity at basic mental level is natural and constitutive part of our existence and the empirical world is constructed at this level, the conventionally meaningful application of concepts and language is confined to this realm. Any further mental activity like discursive or hypostatizing thinking, an attempt to construct a system of ideas and to describe the transcendent reality is bound to be empty in content and purposeless. Enterprise, as it does not in any way mitigate, rather causes the human suffering. Unrestricted use of concepts and language outside the empirical or conventional realm and hypostatization thereof play off havoc with human goal of achieving universal peace, love, compassion, harmony and other human values. These universal interests can be fulfilled only when there is cessation of unrestricted languaging and discursive thinking. Fixing the bounds of language to empirical world of day-to-day convention does not mean that the Mādhyamika is a nihilist. He denies neither transcendent reality nor empirical reality in worldly transaction. Although the latter is not the ultimate reality, he tries to distinguish basic mental level and the subsequent mental level so that one rises to a higher level of consciousness. The resultant realization may prove to be transforming knowledge. At the same time, the transcendent reality is not a mystic reality. The Mādhyamika does not deny the external world. He always tries to emphasize the fact that our mind of reasoning can never know it as it is. The metaphysicians do not realize this fact. They are restless to know the real as it is. But they have no other way of knowing and describing it than through the discriminative thinking, vikalp, analytic synthetic method, which is essentially a projection or activity of mind at M2 level. Such mind in the case of different persons describe the same reality in different, sometimes opposite manners. The whole Madhyamika endeavor of Nagarjuna's type is directed towards showing the hollowness of hypostatizing thought and language. Those who take it directed towards the denial of ontological reality does not understand the Madhyamika concern, intention and commitment. Moving on, through the analysis of the nature of mind, the Madhyamika comes to the conclusion that being, that is bhav, are the projections of mind and in relation to its own form, symbols, concepts and judgments. Various linguistic entities which are manifestation of these mental entities further seek their external counterparts. Once the concept requires another concept for its elucidation. For instance, the concept of short is intelligible only in relation to the concept of long and vice versa. Likewise, visual perception arises only having been dependent on eye and form. Any understanding by mind has to be dependent on its subjective projections of forms and symbols, concepts and language. Its inherent and inevitable tendency to look for the corresponding ontological beings in the external world is the incontrovertible evidence of showing the emptiness of such beings in content. Nagarjuna maintains rightly that such beings, bhav, have never arisen ontologically and they are not self-existent. our everyday linguistic conventions such as go, do, cook, read and stand are understood and practiced only when dependent origination, that is pratitya samutpad, or such concepts are accepted. If these concepts are considered independent of other concepts having their own nature, then the convention itself will be made impossible, and the fact of dependent origination and emptiness of cognitive meaning will be denied. The Madhyamika concepts of dependent origination and emptiness, shunyata, can be understood from the following diagram, which you can see on the slide. In figure 1, suppose R is the transcendent reality, dynamic in nature and given in the external world. As we have discussed earlier, the signals emitted by this reality stimulate our senses and mind is then activated, which creates forms, symbols and concepts out of them. Then a judgment is formed. This is the first stage of mental activity M1. R is apprehended as the object constituted by mind of its form, symbol and concepts, whereas R remains intrinsically unknown. This is obvious that the original form, symbol or concept in this case is intelligible only when other concepts are brought in and a judgment is formed. First is denoted by the concept of this, then the alien concepts of subject, predicate and relation between them are brought into interpreted. Now, the form of the judgment is, this is a table. The whole exercise is at mental level M1, which has to do nothing to do with R. The discriminative tendency, vikalp of mind does not understand the signals in any other way than in the form of one concept in relation to other concepts. The concepts are infused with meaning in that way only. This shows the dependent origination of meanings which are non-cognitive in nature. Then starts the interplay of concepts and judgments, which give rise to complex judgment and theories about the original judgment. Thereafter, a second order of meaning is created. Thus, pure reasoning keeps going far away from R, although claiming to know R in this way more and more. In figure 2, the Mādhyamika tries to show, though the analysis of the functioning of mind, the interdependence of concepts and judgments, which further shows the emptiness of their contents, judgments and rational views. C. Proves the non-referential, non-cognitive and empty nature of language in its content. Further, the Madhyamika applies emptiness on the both sides. First, language, concepts and rational views are empty in content because they cannot catch R, and second is empty because it is devoid of any ascriptions. This kind of realization, Shunyata Darshan, brings radical changes in one's thinking, attitude, habits and behavior, making him the savior of the humanity. This is the purpose of the Madhyamika theory. With this, I end my presentation. Thank you.